with Wes, who's watching here, tuning in on YouTube and or Facebook. Uh, we are not live yet on LinkedIn, but we will be in a few moments. So if you're used to this process with me, Career Talk with Wes comes to you live every weekday at noon Eastern, first on Facebook and YouTube, and we wait in the green room here together. This about a minute to get LinkedIn live. So until I figure out a better process, this is what we have. Bear with me as I change some settings. Um, so if you have a beverage, this is the time to sip it. You can join me in the sipping of the beverage. All right, looks like all things are connected. Welcome everyone to Career Talk with Wes. This show is live with you on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube every weekday at noon Eastern. And it is a show about all things career, very general in that sense. However, my viewpoint that I will always be taking will always be on a foundation of building awareness. That is also how I do my work as a career coach and consultant. I work from the basis of building awareness, awareness of self, awareness of others, awareness of the environment and the chess pieces we're playing with, as I like to put it, because uh, as I always say, awareness brings change, and we cannot change what we cannot see. Therefore, the idea is let's get everything in view so that we can have maximum control and opportunity in terms of what we want to do with our career and be intentional. Um, the one thing I want to mention I want to mention that you can work with me as a career coach and consultant if you like to, or if you're interested, contact me through any of these platforms, or you can go on LinkedIn and get my email, or you can even just schedule an appointment with me, and that will be a free consultation. So that's how I always begin, with a free consultation to make sure that we have a good match, and that's how you can work with me if you want to. I have an exciting announcement from the exciting announcement category or territory or area. Um, Career Talk with Wes is now a podcast. So I'm very excited to say that. If you looked at today's uh, image, I didn't have the usual image up there. I still have it on this platform. So right now, if you're looking at me, you see in the top corner there is the logo for this live show, but the podcast has a new logo, and that's going to start being on everything. So it is a slightly different look. There's still an orange, black, and white layout, so it looks similar. But anyway, the podcast is on all your favorite podcast sites, whether it be Apple or Spotify or iHeart or Podbean, or you name it. I'm pretty much on all of them, or at least most that I could find. So the podcast is out there. Love to know what you think of that. You can always, it's a new way to interact with me. The show is intended to be a free, helpful space to be able to think and address and talk about all these kinds of things that I will talk about in career, which I think you're going to find is not common because of the awareness angle I'm always going to be taking. Without further ado, today's topic. What is today's topic? Oh, I forgot something vital. Today's topic is, what do you do when you make a mistake? How do you recover? Well, I'll tell you, recovery, you start over and you do it again. You get knocked down, you get back up. So what I just realized is we're not live on LinkedIn yet because I forgot to push a button. So now I'm going to push that button, and I'm going to give you this preamble again. So feel free to take a nap while I do this beginning part over. I'll keep it shorter. And here we go. Welcome, everyone, to Career Talk with Wes, live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And we had a little delay here today, but we're on all three platforms. The first thing I want to tell you is that the show is called Career Talk with Wes. It's a place to talk about all things career, or hear talk about all things career. It's always done from an angle or from the perspective of awareness, building self-awareness, awareness of others, awareness of all the chess pieces on the board, so that we can all be much more intentional and self-directed and purposeful and create meaning that matters to us if we can actually see everything that is in play, including our own motives and thoughts and blockers and so forth. So that's where the show is. That's the premise of the show. Even though it's a career as a large topic, it's based on awareness. I always say awareness brings change, and you cannot change what you cannot see. So that's the basis of the show. It's also how I do my work with career clients in that context. So if you're looking for a career coach or a consultant or consultant, I work in that capacity. That's the kind of work I do, and that's how I frame it. You'll find this to be unusual, I'm sure, as will working with me to be unusual, meaning it's hard to find. I can say that confidently because it just is. It's hard to find people who work in the space of all the decisions and thoughts and things we need to manage in our career while dealing with the psychology and the neuroscience and the other components that go into managing self and managing your life. So all that said, I'm available to, if you want to work with me as a career coach, you can look through me on any of these platforms, especially LinkedIn is the easiest way to actually get in touch with me and book an appointment, which first appointment is always a free consultation. That said, I have really exciting news. And because I made a mess up earlier today, I get to say this a second time because I have to restart the show. The Career Talk with Wes podcast has arrived. It is now out on all platforms, all places that you can get your podcast. We are now on, or I am now on. And that just gives you another opportunity to have a free place and a space to talk about all things career and delve into the kinds of topics that I delve into. So that audio podcast, and right now the podcast is audio only. You have the video versions here. There's a YouTube channel, so you can always get the video versions there. But the podcast is audio. And I'm super excited. I hope you'll join me in that. I hope you will tune in, download, follow, and please give feedback. I'm going to open my chat here just in case anybody has any feedback for me right here. I invite your comments, questions, concerns, thoughts, all of it. Please fire away because that gives us more topics to cover that are important to you, not just me, but what do you want to talk about or what you want to hear from me? And if you want to do the talking, please go right ahead. I'll invite you into the show. So with that, let me get on to the show itself without further ado, meaning today's topic. Today's topic is one that I talk with clients about regularly, perhaps even daily, it feels like, almost every day, if not every day. I talk with at least one of my clients or several or all of them about work-life balance. And that term is I don't know if we've gotten to the point where we're not hearing that term anymore. It's possible because we've been saying work-life balance for a really long time. And I do raise this question about what does it mean? And that's what I'm going to get into today. Just a couple of two ways we can look at work-life balance. That's what I'll get into in a second. But just to address the term work-life balance, some people oppose the term itself because it's inherently polarizing. Work, life, two different universes, and some people don't like that right at the outset, just because it would sound more authentic and perhaps cohesive if we just looked at our lives and ourselves as selves. And I tend to agree with that, meaning your life is your life. What you do at work, what you do when you're not in work, what you do on your weekends, what you do with your family, your friends, all the things that you do are all your life. Work is just a component within there, and you're not a different person. You just express yourself different ways, and essentially you probably have a different rule set that you abide by, even possibly a different value set that you abide by when in work, whatever work is for you. And so it does sort of beg, that we ask the question, is it a good idea to even separate that work-life idea? Or can we somehow show up authentically everywhere and just sort of make our adjustments along the way? I just think it's possibly a more cohesive viewpoint. That isn't really what I want to talk about today, but I just want to acknowledge that may be what you're thinking. What I want to do is actually I want to set up two, as I said, two perspectives to acknowledge one and then begin to address the other. So here's the two perspective. When it comes to work-life balance, and we'll just call it that for now. Um, uh, there's the question of you setting your boundaries with your organization or whatever it is. If you're an entrepreneur, it's still an organization. It's still, you're speaking to somebody who runs the business, which is you, your entrepreneurial self. But in any case, even if you're an individual artist, actor, singer, uh, bass player, hey, don't look past the bass player. Don't do that. Inside joke for bass players. uh, but whatever it is, there's a perspective that says I'm going to set these boundaries, and usually this is really we're talking about logistics. Like this is where we think about hours. Like what hours are we going to be available to work? What hours will we be working? You know, which we would consider if we're in an office. What time are we going to get there? What time are we going to leave? How much time do we have for lunch? Do we have time for breaks? If you've ever worked in a factory, I have, and those things are there. You know, those days are very structured. What time you show up, the time you have breaks, the time you have lunch, the time you punch out, all those things. So there are environments that are very structured, and there are others that are very unstructured, like a work from home. You know, and even then, let's say work from home in comparison, when you think about the hours, that's part of it is maybe you don't have set hours. Maybe it's a number of getting a certain amount of work done in a day. Uh, but the thing is, either way, when you're setting up this part of work-life balance, we're talking about the hours you're agreeing to and setting as far as expectations go between you and your employer or organization, that these are the hours where I'll work. These are the ways I'll handle any PTO. Ways that I'll if I'm going to take a half a day, that means I have to log in for 4 hours, or you know, there's all these logistics to what it means to set the boundaries between to hold the balance between work and life. Can I leave early? Can I work from home on certain occasions? Um, and so on and so on. Now, but I'm saying these are the oh, here's some more. Am I going to accept email communications before or after hours or on the weekend? Am I going to accept phone calls or customer requests over, you know, overnight, outside of work hours, only during work hours? Do I have an SLA, a service level agreement, where I would say if a client contacts me or a customer contacts me, I will get back to them within a certain number of hours? All of these ways are the ways that we set the hard logistic boundaries between our work and our life. It also gets down to what kind of time will I spend on my work computer on a personal item? Like say I have to set a doctor's appointment online. Do I need to clarify? Does that, you know, do I get to do things like that? Do I get to check Facebook during lunch or whatever? You know, these are all boundaries that are sort of tangible. I'm sure you're looking for the right word or right word here. Concrete, tangible boundaries that I highly encourage that you negotiate to the degree that it's helpful to you up front with any work setting or organizational setting that you're approaching, especially if you're just approaching a new work-life situation, a new work-life balance. Best to set those hard, concrete, tangible boundaries up front. So we're not guessing about what we do when we have a doctor's appointment. We're not guessing about when we want to have the option to work from home or on a Saturday, or that whether we're going to take a phone call after hours, or all these things. It would behoove all of us to iron these things out and be more than iron them out, be deliberate, purposeful, intentional, clear, direct, and assertive about all the things that we want to be the conditions that we will agree to in how they affect all the things that affect work-life balance. What will be work? What will be life? How will they take their places? And we'll know when we're out of bounds. And what's the agreement for that too? Is coloring out of the lines layer temporary? In other words, if I take a client call on a Friday night at 10 o'clock at night, Does that mean I'm going to expect to do it every Friday night? Or, can I do that once in a while and I'm not rewriting the book? So as you can see, it can be pretty exhaustive to go through that, but I encourage you to go into a new situation, especially establishing all these things as clear as it makes sense for you to establish them. And if you're in a situation that's already been set up, of course, this is much more difficult because it's much more difficult to undo old boundaries and set new ones than it is to set them the way you want them in the first place. But even if you do, you'll always find yourself needing to adjust a boundary. Therefore, it's good to know how to do it. So I won't go into that today, but I'll say it's extremely important to know how to set a boundary in a new situation and in a current situation, especially if things aren't going well. Now, the second item, and this is the one I really want to focus on today, but I wanted to be clear about the first one. The second one is when it comes to work-life balance, how are you setting the boundaries with yourself? This is a different contract. The other one is a contract with the organization, and you have two parties that have to recognize the contract, be it verbal, be it in writing, be it a hybrid, which is usually the case. We can't really have every single negotiable point of setting boundaries in writing. But somehow they have to be acknowledged that they exist, however you're going to do it. But what about the ones you set with yourself? Which the first set could be whatever they are and can mean nothing to the second set. The second set is the one you agree upon with yourself and then have complete responsibility for implementing and holding those boundaries you hold with yourself. So in other words, example, you decide that within your company organizational boundaries for work life that you're going to take, you're going to answer emails or take calls after hours up to a certain hour. Let's just, give you something to look at. Now, how do you set that boundary with yourself? So, because setting it with yourself is a whole different ball game, right? You could, let's just say we have scope creep, which essentially when initially you have some kind of idea of the limitations of a project or a set of boundaries, and then they start to creep because one day they went out a little over, then the next time they went a little more over, and suddenly they're quite blurred, and suddenly what was work time has now expanded well beyond what it originally was just by creeping little by little, so you don't quite notice it. This is where setting the boundaries with yourself is critical, because how are you going, what mechanism is going to help you to realize that scope creep has happened, that you need to catch something while it's new and fresh, like, oh, we've obliterated my work-life boundary when it comes to emails. Uh-oh, I have to recognize that. I have to be the one that takes full responsibility to get it back on track, or if need be, to manage it myself. So another piece of this when you're making boundaries with yourself is you have to decide with yourself whether these are working, one, two, whether they're actually manageable, whether you can hold them or not. So try to get more specific about setting boundaries with yourself. One way to put it is a boundary with your organization doesn't mean much if it's not also set with you, meaning that you're able to discipline yourself to hold to it, right? So if you agree with your company that I will not be answering emails after certain hours, but then you do, that means you're not managing them with yourself. So you're deciding, oh, it was too compelling in the moment, so I answered them. So now the work-life boundaries with your organization are set, but you're not able to hold them with yourself. And now here's where it really can get sticky. And this is really where I want to go today. I don't know how much time we'll spend on it, but I want to make sure you understand what I'm talking about in this second one, setting boundaries with yourself. Your life, which is trying to be balanced, or you're trying to balance it with your work, is everything else, right? In this polarized setting, your life is your family, your friends, you're going to the gym, you're exercising, taking time for a walk, silent contemplation, reading, vacation, downtime, all these things, being social, all the things that are serving your life, not your work, not specifically. They're serving your life, whatever it is you need to do for your life. So we can open a giant Pandora's box here and say that includes your health, taking care of yourself. That includes your mental health, taking care of your mental health specifically so that you're feeling good, feeling healthy, feeling sharp, having all of your faculties and not being overstressed, run down, burnt out, pick your word, pick your condition. Uh, there's that. There's protecting your time, literally, so that there's enough time for life. So, for instance, let's just say you set up a work-life balance schedule with your organization that you like, makes sense to you, looks good on paper. But when you come home, you are carrying that further into your life well beyond the hours that you dedicated to work. So yeah, I mean, this is extremely common, unfortunately, especially people who are really ambitious and engaged in their work and really often really good at what they do. These people are the most. If I'm talking to you, you might be the most susceptible to this issue, which is you have organizational boundaries that work. Yeah, I don't have to be in work until this time. I don't have to answer any emails. But you know that you're carrying work all through. It doesn't leave your mind. It doesn't leave the stress of the work, the feelings that come with it, the emotions, or even the constant thinking, just the thought process, the cognitive piece of your work goes with you to the dinner with your friends. It goes with you to the movies with your family. It goes with you to um, that little getaway day trip you were doing, or that that you wanted to study something completely different, or your hobby, or your on and on. All things that are really yours, that are supposed to be isolated in the life domain, are getting crowded and diminished because you're carrying emotionally and mentally and cognitively your work and all its issues around with you, which means you've set those boundaries that you needed to set with your organization, but you haven't set them with yourself. And that can affect your relationships. Obviously, if you have any relationships, they're going to be affected, and not in a positive way, most likely, if this is happening, this kind of scope creep of your work invading or spilling over into your personal part, your life. So the whole point of this is I've already been more exhaustive than I meant to be up front, and I don't think I'm going to exhaust this point any further. I'm going to hope you get the point. You can set all the logistical, concrete, tangible boundaries needed with your organization. And if you don't manage the self part, where you manage your own boundaries with yourself, where you tell yourself, I'm not talking about work after 6 p.m. I'm not thinking about work after 6 p.m. I'm not going to make a phone call and vent about work after 6 p.m. I'm not saying these are what you should be doing or not doing. I'm saying that's a boundary that you set with yourself. And the problem is all you've got is you and your self-discipline to do it. And it's, let's just face it, unless you're naturally good at it, this is the hardest part. It's much easier in a way to have your work say, well, everybody's getting up from their chairs, time to go home. Okay, that boundary is easier than when you're home and you can't sleep. How about that? How about sleep? How about good old sleep? Let's just say you're a person, I'm talking to you now, and you're not getting enough sleep. And the reason you're not getting enough sleep is because work out of the work-life balance is all in places affecting your sleep. So how damaging might that be? I would say critically damaging. One of the most critical parts of the life part of the work-life balance would be sleep for everyone. Nobody's exempt from that one. So that's a good example as any to leave you with, which is to say, set those boundaries at work. Great. Get them as concrete as possible. Great. set them with yourself. And if you're having trouble setting them with yourself, then we're into the awareness category. Something's going on where if there's behavior that's damaging your work-life balance and you don't want it to be that way, you don't want the balance to be imbalanced, but it continues to be imbalanced, something is going on beneath the level of awareness that is preventing you from taking the steps you want to take. Because it's not that you don't know it, right? It's not that I didn't need to tell you need to sleep. I didn't need to tell you need to set boundaries for yourself. You knew that. What you may not know is how come I can't seem to get it done? And that's when there are forces going on, perhaps beneath the surface, that need to be looked at. No, I'll continue to cover things like that. But I would encourage you to start diving in to what's going on then. What's going on with your thought process that's keeping you from setting the boundaries you need on that, that life side for yourself. That's all I have for today. This has been Career Talk with Wes. This is a show, a place, like I said, where we can talk about things like this from the level of awareness and how awareness brings change, so we can see the things we currently cannot see, so we can bring about change and growth and all the things that we want that are purposed. I'm available to you as a career coach and consultant. If you're interested, check into ways to contact me and we'll have a free consultation. And last but not least, I'm super excited about the podcast, Career Talk with Wes, which is now out there on all your podcast platforms. And so I'd love to hear your feedback on that. And thank you for joining me today, whether live or on demand or on the podcast. If part of this made it to the podcast, thank you for listening. And with that, I wish you a great day. See you next time.